Hey guys, subscribe for daily content. And if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks!
What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today we're going to be talking about my knife design, which of course is Excalibur, made by Kunwu. I'm very excited about this. I realized I needed to do this video while I had both of these here. The plain one, of course, was given away during my 600,000 subscriber event. And before I mail it out, I need to do this video so that I can, use this as an example. Thanks so much to my patrons for supporting me. Literally, I could not have done this without you guys. Thanks to all of my viewers. I could not have done this without you guys. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at the_metal_complex. I am not reviewing my own knife today. Nope, I'm going to leave that up to the other reviewers. I don't think it makes any sense. But what I am going to do is answer any and all questions that I've gotten about this knife over the last few days. I think it's a good idea. It's also going to be really helpful to other reviewers who receive this sample here. This one up top is going to go out to a number of different content creators, many that you're familiar with. And I think this video will serve, as a means of helpful information before they talk about it. So I'm going to go over all of that stuff, including specs. I'm going to talk about how I sort of came up with this, the motivation behind it, all of that stuff. If you have questions about this, hopefully I can answer those questions today. But if you have additional questions, you make it all the way through the video and you're like, you didn't answer my question, just leave it down in the comments section and I'll do my best to answer it. So we're going to move this one out of the way here real quick. Yes, I'm going to talk about the different versions we're going to do, the different price ranges. I'm going to talk about that, but nothing in this video is an absolute promise. It's everything that we're trying to do. So no guarantees, but we have a pretty good idea at this point. Also, release dates and pre-order. When's that going to be? We don't know yet, but I'll tell you, as soon as we do know, you will see it on my community tab here on YouTube, and you will definitely see it on Instagram. Those will be like the #1 places that it'll go. I imagine Kunwu will make an announcement, but I will make it known. You will know, and the dates are going to be broad so that people have lots of time to get their pre-orders in. So first off, what is the overall length of Excalibur? Which I do realize is not at all an original name. There's definitely other knives out there that have been named Excalibur, but the whole purpose of naming it Excalibur was because this knife was based on a series I did 6 years ago called The Quest for the Perfect Folding Knife. And I called this hypothetical knife Excalibur, right, symbolically, and I went over all the little details that would be in this knife if I were creating it. And so I never thought this knife would come into existence, and so I thought it would be, appropriate to name this knife Excalibur. That's where that comes from. 8.5 inches overall. Blade length is 3.75, and your cutting edge is 3.5 inches. On the full version of Excalibur, it will be a titanium integral, meaning the frame will be one solid piece of titanium. You will have DLC optional. This is a true DLC coating on a Vanx blade and a titanium frame. We will be including pivot collars on both sides. So you guys see here, there's only a pivot collar on one side. There will be a pivot collar on the other side. What if I don't want Damascus? Don't worry about that. We figured that would be the case. We will be offering both plain black and a satin pivot collar, ideally that you could flip-flop if you wanted to. So if you're like, I want a black Excalibur and I want a silver pivot collar, ideally we would be able to let you do that. Or you'd want black. You want the whole thing black, right? Also totally fine. Same thing with the version that is going to be satin finished. You can pay a little extra for the pocket clip that's Damascus and the pivot collars that are Damascus, or you can just get a plain pivot collar. I realize that not everybody wants that look, and so that was really, really important to me. What about the texturing here? The diamond texturing. Are we limited to the diamond texturing? No. Ideally, you would have 3 different options. At least 2. We would at least do textured or like an orange peel. So many of you who have Kunwu knives, for like other models, Anything that you've seen, Kunwu do as far as texturing, ideally we would have that, but at the very least we would have an orange peel texturing, which would be very smooth, both DLC and non-DLC, and the diamond pattern. So you will have a couple of options there. There's another little detail that there's actually a few different details that people have been asking me about. Are you going to put a bald spot underneath the pocket clip? Because that thing is writing directly on texturing. Yes, in fact, I'll show you a picture of that right now. How we're going to do that, right? So there will be a bald spot under there. Well, okay, Metal Complex, that's great, but you are like the biggest stickler in terms of, knives that are not made for left-handed people. Like your knife is clearly right hand only. We thought of that too. We're actually not just going to offer a mounting position on the left-hand side of the knife. We're going to make an entirely left-handed frame lock version of this. So if you're left-handed, you don't have to deal with a right-handed frame lock and just moving your pocket clip over to the other side. No, there's going to be left-handed Excaliburs, which I feel like is a much better option for left-handed people entirely. Is there going to be a less expensive version? Like, isn't your knife going to be super expensive? Yeah. An integral, especially DLC, but an integral titanium frame lock with a Vanx blade is not cheap, even when it's being made in China. So ideally, we would have that price point, the base price point, which would be this guy with plain pivot collars and a plain pocket clip, Vanx and integral. We would have this guy at about $400. That's a lot of money, and not everybody can afford that. So we're trying to do a less expensive version, which would be a sandwich construction, not a integral, which is going to be beneficial, I feel like, for a lot of people, because there's going to be a lot of people who are like, listen, I can afford the integral, I just don't care about the integral nature. That's a me thing, admittedly. I just really love it, integral knives, but I realize not everybody does. So we're trying to do one that's in LMAX and like a two-piece frame, and ideally, no promises, ideally that would be right around $250, trying to stay in line with general Kunwu pricing. We're also going to have the Vanx heat treated the exact same way that Kunwu generally heat treats it, which is really, really good. Another change here, let's see, I want to make sure we went over the frame, the left-handed stuff, right? A couple of additional changes. A lot of you probably noticed, like, okay, so the studs are the stops, right? So they're just like slamming into the frame and there's like no housing for that. Yeah, that's one thing. You don't notice it as much. I mean, either way, anything that's got, external, like the thumb studs are the stops or it's external stops, right? Even like on the Strider here, you can see like there's little marks where they sort of run into the frame, and that's just normal. That's just how that is. But I do want that actually to be curved, more like how it is on the Hinderer XM18. These knives are out here for a reason. We're going to talk about it in a sec. So here's a picture of how that's going to look on the final version. That will definitely be changed. Not only is it going to look better, but it should increase reliability over time, and it just makes more sense. It just is kind of a little aesthetic thing. Like there should be specific spots for these thumb studs to actually meet the frame. Currently, the frame is also the stop in the closed position. This will be changed. I will not have these contacting the frame as the stop in the closed position. We will probably be doing something more like Excalibur V2, which you guys can't see right now, but the frame, the back or inside of the integral frame was sort of up, and it allowed for the blade to stop on the frame completely internal. And ideally, we would not have this thumb stud stopping on the frame. This wasn't an accident. I had requested that. I said, let's do that, because like the Medford H-frame Marauder or the Marauder in general does that. They just use the frame as the stop. I don't want two different positions for the stop to be contacting the frame and leaving little marks, which again is not a big deal on the non-coated ones. But on the coated ones, you see a little mark there, right? So we don't want to do that. I want to make it to where it is just a lot, that the contact is internal on one of those spots. And so you have to look at those. You only have to look at the two spots up here, which again will be within little housed areas up there. I think that's a lot better. So another change that's going to be made, a lot of people ask me, like, are you going to do something to showcase that this is your design? How about your logo on the pivot? Yes. So we tried, ideally, I wanted the Knight helmet logo on there. That's what I thought would look the best. And Sergio said, we tried that and it just didn't look good. So how about the MC logo? And I said, yeah, I think that actually would be really cool. And so what we're trying to do is the MC logo, a lot like this. This coin was made for me, but it would be the M and the sword and the C entirely by itself. Obviously not this text, but without the little light beams that come out of it. And we would do that on one side and then the Kunwu logo on the other side. Very subtle. That would be the only billboarding on it. I was really surprised that people wanted the logo on there at all. I was totally prepared to just keep it completely sterile just with the Kunwu pivot, but a lot of you guys wanted that on there, and I thought, you know what? Yeah, we can do that. There's nothing wrong with a logo on the pivot. That's pretty minimal, right? And it doesn't take away from the aesthetic of the knife. Another major request for this knife that we are, not going to change is the relief cut and the fact that you can see it out here. So personally, I'm going to be honest. I told everybody no. Everybody wanted me to put the relief cut on the inside, and this was the thing where I said no, I'm not going to do that. And the reason was purely selfish from my end. The truth is, I don't like how that looks, and I realized I'm in the minority. I feel like the vast majority of people love the look of this, being perfectly consistent with the relief cut on the inside. Sergio actually had some scientific reasons not to do that, which I'm going to show on screen right now. Apparently it makes it a little mushier and not feel quite as good. I can't remember his exact wording, but there is apparently a reason not to do that. And I don't think that this is a deal breaker for everyone. Obviously, there are plenty of designs out there that have the relief cut on the inside and they work just fine. I just don't want it that way. And then hearing his reasoning helped me kind of double down on why I don't want that. And I think this is a pretty minor detail. I think very few people will decide, that they don't want this based on this fact alone. So if you wanted that, I'm sorry, but that's something that's not going to change. Another thing that is going to change is the blade stock thickness. This is going to be confusing for some people, but personally, while I understand completely the benefits of having a nice thin blade stock and then a geometry that allows for the edge to get super duper thin, which, guys, it is. This thing, it's not the absolute perfect slicing machine in terms of, competition out there, but holy moly, the edge on this thing is nice and thin. We are going to slightly increase the blade stock thickness of this, which should have a trivial impact on the thinness behind the edge. The reason we're doing that is because currently on the integral models, the balance is back here, which is still within this primary index finger position, but ideally I'd like it to be slightly closer to the pivot so it doesn't feel so butt heavy, which is generally something that you get with integral knives. They feel a little butt heavy. Obviously, this will not be nearly, the same thing on the versions that are two-piece, which, again, all the details on the two-piece yet to be out there. I don't have any pictures or anything like that. We're working on that. It won't be nearly the same thing because that one won't be nearly as heavy in the butt end. And if you want to know exactly how much this guy weighs, I can tell you right now. I believe it's about 5.8 or 5.9 ounces currently. Obviously, 5.8 ounces. So increasing the blade stock thickness to it's currently 125. We want to go about 135, which again, it's a very trivial difference, right? For this particular blade shape and what it comes down to behind the edge, it's going to make almost no difference. I'm sure people will argue, but this is definitely something that we are doing. Oh, we've apparently changed 5.9 ounces, but it will probably push it up to 6 or slightly over 6 ounces, which is going to be too big and too heavy for some people to carry, and that's fine. I want people to keep in mind that I created this knife as like the realization of my ultimate folding knife, right? Regardless of what everybody else wanted, I wanted to create something for me, and then anybody else who shared in the same interests, exactly the same interests as me, would have an opportunity to pick up something that I created, right? So I am not in any way trying to create something that is completely and totally unique. I am not in any way trying to create a knife that is 100% made for everybody. Definitely not. This is made for people who have the same or a lot of the same aesthetic and functional preferences as me. And that's part of the reason why we did not do a flipper tab, because personally, I think with a lot of knives, a flipper tab creates a bit of an ergonomic problem design-wise. It also can get in the way when you're trying to, be really comfortable on the knife while you're continuing to use the knife. This is the reason that I ended up saying that the non-flipper versions of the XM18s were ideal, because the flipper tab, in relationship to how big the choil was, the versions with the flipper tabs made this area up here a lot less comfortable and a lot more kind of choked. I didn't like that. I wanted to be able to kind of rock back a little bit and keep my index finger away from the cutting edge. But when the flipper tab is there, you're forced to get right up behind the cutting edge. I didn't like that. So I thought, I think the ideal version is this non-flipper forward spear, because I can reverse flick it. The thumb studs are not in the most ideal position for thumb flicking it, because they're the stops and just relating to the rest of the frame. But I can reverse flick this one because of the fuller. So I thought, man, if I ever made my own knife, I would do a combination, external stop, thumb stud, and opening hole, so that I could deploy it exactly the way that I wanted to, when I wanted to, not have anything in the cutting path because the thumb studs clear the cutting path. This is just an open hole. And I also gained the benefit of a nice, comfortable choke up position. I told Sergio, I said, we got to knock this area down. This area here, there should be distinct lock-in zones, but enough of this is soft so that you can move around. It's nice and open. You're not completely and totally confined to any one specific spot. This is big and open, so you can be comfortable. That's also the reason that we made the clip short and knocked the edges down. I don't like clips that go up and into my hand. It might be a little bit pinchy for some people, but I think that this is going to work just fine in terms of keeping the knife in your pocket reliably, right? And it will be titanium no matter what, so nice and forgiving. It shouldn't catch on anything. It's not anybody's favorite pocket clip, but it will work, and with a big emphasis on ergonomic comfort and lock-in, which will definitely be more prominent in the versions that have the diamond texturing. But if you go with a version that has a smoother texturing, you're still going to be able to lock in comfortably and feel like you're not going to drop the knife. So I think another great question is, why Vanx? Great question. Absolutely great question. So Vanx is not, I think, I've talked about Vanx in the past and how amazing it is in terms of corrosion resistance, which it is. It is absolutely incredible when it comes to resisting corrosion, but not rust proof. I don't want anybody to think it's rust proof, but very, very good. And especially the versions with the DLC, you're really going to have that on top. Have that extra corrosion resistance on top. Vanx has a really, really great balance of attributes in terms of your ease of maintenance, which is a big one for me. I don't want to spend 45 minutes, an hour, anything like that, touching up a knife. And I love steels that have absolutely insane edge retention. I think that's really neat. But me personally, I really enjoy S35VN a lot, and I love CPM 154 a lot because they're balanced. They're steels that I feel like I don't have to hold its hand, or I don't need it to hold my, I can just use it and be like, yeah, it's fine. It's CPM 154. It's S35VN. And these steels are not exactly the same as Vanx. In fact, they're quite a bit different. But what this has in common is it's going to be easy for the average person to touch it up. Right? If you want to take this out and use it, which it's designed to do, it's not designed to baton, it's not designed to pry. I'm sure that there are content creators out there who will do that, but that is not what it's designed to do. It is a simple titanium frame lock. It is designed to cut and withstand normal amounts of use, within a reasonable parameter of knife use, right? But Vanx will maintain a good edge. It's got pretty good edge retention. It's also reasonably tough. It's unbelievably stainless, and it is very easy to touch up or reprofile. This is really, really great. I asked my buddy Levon, what's the difference between Vanx and MagnaCut? And he said this is a very, very simple answer, and there's much more science that goes into it. But the simplest way, which, I am not a metallurgist, I'm just taking these words, from my buddy Levon. And I think Laren Thomas probably could give a much better explanation, or people in the comments could, right? But MagnaCut is like a tougher Vanx. that where the corrosion resistance isn't quite as good. And MagnaCut, as you know, has excellent corrosion resistance. The main reason for including, a steel that has absolutely incredible corrosion resistance is because I want you guys to be able to take these knives out and use them without having a lot of fear that you're going to get little discoloration spots on them. There is nothing more disappointing for a lot of people than taking your beautiful, expensive knife out and using it and trying to love it, right? I mean, like if you want to collect these, fine, but I also made this for the user crowd because I want to use it. That's what I've been doing. I want you to be able to go out and enjoy it and not have to worry about wiping it off every single time or adding oil to it every single time. Like, are you going to have to add oil and stuff like that over time? Well, sure, right? But not as much as, something that like Crewware, right? Or 3V or anything. There's plenty of stainless steels out there, but Vanx, in 10 years, this knife should still look great. And I want people to feel that joy. There's a specific joy that I get with knives that I feel like I don't have to baby. I'm like, yeah, I'm going to take that one out today. I don't have to worry about that one. I've just really enjoyed that. So that's not ideal for everybody, but I feel like Vanx is not only is it incredibly premium, definitely, it's an expensive steel. It's much more expensive than your average super steel. So you get that feeling, where you're just like, I don't know why, but it's just premium, But it also has a really, really incredible attribute that I think many, many, many people will enjoy after they have used this knife for years and years and years, and they go back and look at it. And maybe it's got some scratches on it, but most likely no, corrosion or discoloration, especially with the DLC coated ones. Big part. A big, thing for me was being able to work with somebody who could really do a true DLC. And if you're new, you're like, what does that mean? Like, it's black. There are many different coatings that you can apply on a knife, and most of them are garbage. But when you get into the nicer coatings, you're talking about Cerakote, PVD, and DLC. Now, Cerakote and PVD are just fine. They're not incredibly durable. DLC is way more durable. This makes the knife not scratch proof, but incredibly scratch resistant. And on top of that, it is applied to a satin finish, so you're not being slowed down while you're cutting. Doesn't create additional drag like something, like the DLCs that you get on Spyderco. I love Spyderco knives. I'm not coming down on them. I'm just saying the chalky DLC finish on a Spyderco knife does create additional drag. So when you apply DLC to a satin finish blade, it does not increase drag, but it does heavily increase the corrosion resistance and the scratch resistance of the blade. Here's another great question. Why is there no lanyard hole? Because I hate lanyard holes and I hate how they look. And I realize that there are people who would prefer a lanyard hole back here, and I just really, really hate them. So maybe we will include some type of, on the integral, absolutely not. I don't want anything breaking this up. This is such a clean look for me, or to me. I love how this looks on both sides. I do not want it muddied up with a lanyard hole. Perhaps we will include some type of additional bar on the sandwich construction version so that people can attach a lanyard if they want, but there will not be a hole on this knife. I just really hate how that looks. It has killed design aesthetics for me for so long, and I think it's fine if other people want to do this on their own knives, but for me personally, it was a big absolutely not. So that's not going to be included there. We've been talking a lot about the DLC one, but I know there's plenty of you who are going to be much more interested in the non-DLC one, so I'm going to use this one for the next example. But the thumb stud design, where did that come from? Actually, Sergio surprised me with this. I had no specific, I think I said, let's do something similar to like the Ontario Rat, because I've always really liked those thumb studs, nice and big and easy to interact with. And either that detail was missed or Sergio was like, nah, I'm going to just do my own thing. And you know what? It actually ended up really great. I love these thumb studs. They're perfect, and they're nice and large. They're easy to interact with. They're in exactly the right spot to deploy the knife. This is so comfortable. God, it feels so good to break that detent, which is about, I would describe it as medium, right? You don't want it to be too strong, because you definitely want people to be able to comfortably deploy this with, I think a stronger detent makes more sense on a flipper, but being able to reverse flick this knife or thumb flick it out like this, right? Or pinch open it, use the thumb studs. You want people to do that and still feel like you are applying the maximum amount of force, breaking the detent, that satisfying thwack every single time. But man, these thumb studs are easy to engage. This area has been nicely opened up so that you can fully engage the opening hole or the thumb stud any way you want, and it should deploy exactly the way that you would expect it to deploy. This is obviously going to run on bearings, and it is very smooth, and it will continue to operate very smooth as you continue to deploy it and use it. So why the integral frame? Why the obsession with the integral frame? Well, I do specifically love how clean it looks, and I really enjoy the look of sterile blades ever since I saw my first sterile XM18. No logos or anything like that. And I realized, people are like, you just said you're going to put your logo on the pivot. True. But I think the appreciation for how a sterile knife looks, it came from that. And I don't hate knives that show the hardware, but it's something that I appreciate so much about an integral knife is that there's no hardware on the show side. Obviously, you're going to see the pocket clip screw over here. You're going to see the screw for the LBS, which, again, you're thinking, why is there an LBS? You already have an over travel stop with the lock bar insert here. Two reasons, right? We'll get back to the reasoning behind the integral here in a second, but two reasons. Number one, I love when things are overkill when they don't need to be. This has two over travel stops. So there's no way to bend this frame out unless you're doing something incredibly stupid with it. Furthermore, the reason for the LBS disc, lock bar stabilizer, actually has a different function than a lock bar insert that is an over travel. Obviously, the lock bar insert, so you have steel on steel contact here between this and the lock face of the blade. This LBS, when it's pushed over here, it keeps the lock bar from being pushed in or bent into the frame, which allows the lock bar to continue to do its job over time. Lock bars can actually mash into the frame when people disengage if they're pushing too hard this way. Now that's really unlikely, but I thought that was a really interesting detail about the Hinderer, because that's a Hinderer thing. Rick Hinderer invented that. I guess he was a firefighter, and in a moment of crazy adrenaline, he actually bent his lock bar over crazy on one of his knives while he was, I think, trying to free someone from a vehicle. And he was like, well, that's not going to do. So he invented this and then eventually started putting the lock bar inserts in there. And it was kind of a double. It was overkill, and it was a double function, which I thought was really neat. I also really like I don't know if industrial is the right word. I like this side being a little more mechanical and busy. I think that's really cool. One side, it's really, really clean. And on the other side, you got a few necessary things. It also allows for an additional spot of customization. This should be a pretty standard size of LBS, meaning you should be able to buy custom LBS. Maybe we can provide some different colors and things. Maybe we do a Timascus one, but an additional area where you can customize the knife and add a little bit of flair to it, right? Some people like to do the glow in the dark ones. I don't know. I can't promise that we're going to make those, but these are simple things for people to create on the aftermarket, and it just adds another little level there where you can do that, or you can leave it plain like this. The other benefit to an integral is insanely simple disassembly. There's literally one thing to take out. If you want to clean this knife, or you want to get a look at the internals, whatever reason, you just take the pivot out, and then the blade comes out, and that's it, right? You don't have to take the lock bar insert out. You don't have to take the LBS disc out, or the pocket. There's no reason to take the pocket clip out, right? Unless you just want to carry the knife without a pocket clip. But if you want to do that, it's really simple. And that was another element here that was really, really important to me, was keeping this thing as friendly as possible. I don't want something overcomplicated. I want it to be incredibly friendly. On the topic of the lock, you went with a simple frame lock. There's so many options for locks. Why didn't you collaborate with somebody to create an ambidextrous locking system, or something that was much stronger, right? Why didn't you, go with something like the Shark Lock or the Super Lock? Well, collaborating with people, number one, is very tricky. Definitely. I mean, all parties have to benefit. And that just adds layers of complication. Is that possible down the road to collaborate with somebody who's invented some really interesting lock? Oh yeah, definitely. I've already kind of, I've already kind of had a couple little conversations there, but that's way down the road. We did not plan originally for this to be a frame lock. I had a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C, and I'll tell you exactly what those plans were. Plan A was to actually try to implement the same lock that was on the Benchmade Anthem, which was a coil spring crossbar lock, not an Omega spring crossbar lock. This would have been solving two problems. Number one, it would be ambidextrous, so we wouldn't have to make left-handed versions of the knife. Just flip the clip over to the other side. Number two, it would solve the issue of people having issues with Omega springs that break or are not necessarily ultra reliable. We have a coil spring in there. If you didn't know that about the Anthem, that was the coolest thing about the Anthem. People complained about that knife, $400 for an American Integral, and now we look back on it fondly and think, oh God, if only we still had this magnificent knife. And I thought, I want to bring that back to the table. That'd be so cool, right? And turns out there's a patent on that lock specifically, and maybe there's a workaround, but I didn't want to mess with any of the legal stuff. So I thought, let's go with plan B, which would be a compression lock in an integral, which would have been very tricky. I think that would have been the very first compression lock in an integral knife. The patent ended on the compression lock, so creating one that would operate in an integral would have been totally fine, but it would have been really tricky. Kunwu had never created a compression lock before, and he said it's not out of the question for the future, but it requires a lot of testing. This went through an incredible amount of testing just for the frame lock to make sure that the geometry was good. I'm not saying so durable you can run over it with a train. I'm just saying as reliable as a frame lock should be, right? So the amount of testing that would have been required for Kunwu to create their own compression lock and have it operate safely, functionally, it would have been sound. Ideally, no lock stick, which would have been tricky. But then implement it in an integral frame. If you think about how tricky that would be, right? So maybe down the road. And we finally concluded, hey, you know what? It's V1. We might have different options down the road. I said you guys can already do a great frame lock. People don't have issues with your frame locks, right? Not generally. So let's release version 1 with a frame lock and just do left-handed models, right? People are familiar with that. It's not going to make everybody happy, but it's going to make a lot of people happy. It's going to be a friendly sort of universally understood locking system. So that's the reason that we went with a frame lock. On the topic of alternate versions of this knife, a couple of different things to talk about here. We already talked about the fact that there is definitely going to be a version of it that is less expensive. Still expensive, right? If our target price point, which is again, just a target price point and no guarantee. If the target price point is $250, right? That's what we're trying to do. But I had mentioned a while ago about doing like a much less expensive version of it in like G10 and 14C28 and trying to make like a budget knife. I would still absolutely love to do that. We had talked about doing an integral version of it where the entire frame is G10, and I think that would be neat, but honestly, I think I would rather just serve like the people who specifically want the budget knife and just do something that I know we can absolutely get at the sub $75 price point. So we would do like a G10, like a contoured G10 nested steel liner lock with a 14C28N blade that would essentially be like the exact same thing and try to get it under $75. I don't know when we would be able to do that, but I think going simple and just going that route and then making it, sort of available for left and right-handed people, either by doing left and right-handed versions, but much more likely just doing a reversible pocket clip. I think that would be the way to go. But again, probably down the road a bit. On the topic of alternate sizes, is there a potential for there to be a larger version or a smaller version? Yes, but not initially. I want to share with you guys Excalibur version 2, which is actually 9¼ inches. Now this one is a lot different, and I changed this knife. I said that's too big. I don't want a knife that big right off the bat, so we shaved it down. But it is absolutely possible. Yeah, they put a lanyard hole in that one. No, there probably won't be a lanyard hole in the integral version of that if we ever do it. This would be maybe way down the road, and I think it would also be a really cool idea to do something in the lines of a 7.5-inch version of this knife, right around the size of the Demko AD 20.5, maybe down the road. Those are the sizes that I'm interested in. I'm not interested in going any bigger than 9.25 or any smaller than 7.5 because I want the benefit of those ergonomic zones to still be there. And I don't want to go micro, and I don't want to go like gigantor crazy town. I just don't want to do that. I think the last thing that we should talk about here is the knives that inspired this design. And I have made this incredibly clear. A lot of people have speculated or said that looks like this or that looks like that. And the truth is that it's like I said in the beginning, the goal was never to create something that was completely and totally unique. Rather, the goal was to combine elements of a lot of my favorite knives that many other knives in the knife world are actually based on or borrow elements. So the reason that you see so many things out there that kind of look like this is because some of the most iconic knives of the last decade or two have inspired so many great designs in the knife world, including this one. So I want to show you guys the exact knives that inspired this design over the last 6 years or so. So we had to zoom out definitely so that we'd have enough room, but I think, obviously the XM18 and specifically the non-flipper Fullard Spear 3.5-inch version. That one, absolutely, that's where I decided, I love the external stop, thumb stud and fuller combo. I love that. I love the open ergonomic profile. I love that diamond textured titanium. I just absolutely love it. This one heavily inspired my design. But also, the next direct inspiration was the Spyderco Shaman. Yes, I know I mispronounced that. These are two of my favorite knives ever. Absolutely. I love the ergonomics of the Shaman. I love the blade shape, right? I love the opening hole. This was the knife that really got me to fall in love with that because it felt big and robust and capable like the XM18, but it felt a little more wieldy, and it felt a little more easy to manipulate because of that opening hole. I also really love, as crazy as it is, I love the look of the oval shape opening hole on the Strider. This is actually an SMF, but more so SNG was what I was, the size is what I was going after. But I really loved the big, open, non-confining, like this transition from the choil to the primary index finger position is a lot softer than the XM18 or even the Shaman. So that was a big deal to me. I realized that was not just like a whoopsie-daisy that ended up being, beneficial for, people who like Strider knives or Strider in general. But that really did create some benefits in terms of ergonomics. So again, we have Sal Glesser, we have Mick Strider, and we have Rick Hinder as being, their designs being major influences. But also, and I think this might be a surprise for some people, the Umnumzahn. So what is it about the Chris Reeve Umnumzahn that I like so much that's different from the other knives? It's the straight. It's straight. Now, the curved, aspects of some of these knives you could say are a major benefit in terms of ergonomics or, the angle of cutting. Maybe, but aesthetically, right? Because this is not designed to be the absolute best tool in existence. It's just one that brings me the most joy. But I just love the straight back, the look of the Umnumzahn. I just think that that's so aesthetically pleasing, and you can actually see a little bit of the inspiration in the handle back here that is different than all of these other knives except for the Umnumzahn. Another major point of inspiration was the Ritter Hogue for a number of different reasons, but the ergonomic comfort in the contouring, and I guess its relationship to the simple drop point blade. I mean, it was such a comfortable, like natural handle. So I needed, all these knives. You could say that the Shaman is contoured. Not really. It's flat, right? But I wanted I still wanted like the fantastic overall profile and utility of, the Ritter Hogue, but I wanted it to look a little bit more like some of these other knives and have a contoured frame that had natural, functional lock-in spots, and that's where that came in. Another one that's not going to fit on the screen right now, but I mean, I kind of, I didn't bring this up in the live stream, but absolutely, whether I realized it or not, I was also influenced by Andrew Demko. The Demco AD20, this is the AD20i, which is exactly the same as the American version, it's just the blade was, made in Italy. But yeah, definitely the position of the thumb stud relative to the opening hole and how it is positioned better than I think any of these, like say for the Ritter Hogue, it's definitely in a better spot than the Umnumzan. It's definitely in a better spot than the XM18. And the Strider, those are literally just stops. I mean, you can't really, you can kind of use them, but they're super teeny tiny, right? This combo here, the positioning of that that thumb stud and its position relative to the opening hole and where it is when it's closed up, I thought, man, this is so perfect. There's definitely a way to do this. And it's not an external stop, right? So the tricky part for me was, how do I get all of that? I want it to be the external stop. I want it to be in a good spot to deploy it. And I want it to be in a good spot relative to the opening hole. I want it to clear the cutting path. It was tricky. I couldn't just slap it together. That's why it took a year, right? But these are absolutely elements that were borrowed and inspired by these iconic knife makers and knife designers. So it's very important to credit Doug Ritter, Chris Reeve, Rick Hinderer, Andrew Demko, Mick Strider, and Sal Glesser, because without these designs sort of leading me to understand my preferences, I could not create this, right? So I did my best to not copy anybody. We didn't take any lines and make them identical. We took things that we thought worked and we molded them and shaped them into something that was kind of the same but still different. So that's where all of this came from. So lastly, I want to talk about my my choice of OEM here. A long time ago, I did a Knife Guy episode saying that it's a fun idea, having my own design out there, but it's never, ever going to happen. And number one, I thought it would be really, really great to have a USA OEM. Now, when I was considering this was before the market went crazy and inflation took, knife prices and threw them into like insanity mode. This was before then. And even back then, I was thinking this is going to be a problem with a US OEM because let's say we hypothetically get someone who can do it. The price is going to be outrageous. They're going to say, you want to do what, Metal Complex? You want to do what? You want us to do what? Right? This is what I wanted to do. And I realized it's going to be so expensive, right? There's going to be a bunch of people out there who are like, great, hey, good job, USA OEM, that's awesome. And then literally the rest of the knife world would just be pissed. Your knife costs what? There's already people saying his knife costs $400. Now they're going to intentionally ignore the fact that I'm doing a less expensive version and ultimately at some point a budget version. No, it's much more attention grabbing to say, MC is going for a cash grab and his knife is $400. They're not going to admit that they know I'm making less expensive versions. But I'm not really worried about those people. But what I'm trying to tell you guys is I am concerned with people being able to afford some version of my knife and having this made in the USA. Yes, there are US integrals out there that are slightly over $400. They are not contoured. They are not Vanx, and they don't have DLC options. These are stupidly expensive things to do. Even if you don't include the DLC, right? Just the Vanx and the contouring, it's absolutely insane. Machine-wise, has one of the best priced US integrals on the market, utilizing MagnaCut and contoured titanium that's textured. They come in at $650. Now, the few people who know why that's a good deal think it's great. But the vast majority of people look at that and go, oh my God, that is insanely expensive. Hats off to Machine-wise for being able to do it, right? But it's still a lot of money. Number two, the ability to make them in large quantities. I do not want people using these knives and flipping them on the secondary market. The whole goal is to not create something that is hard to get, not create something that is rare, right? If you want to collect it, fine, but I don't want my knife to be scarce. I don't want people to be able to take these and go to eBay and make a ton of money on them. Will they be able to right off the bat? I don't know, right? I mean, we're trying to keep the pre-order open. Maybe there will be some, but over time, I would love for these just to be a thing that people can just get. That would be excellent. Going with a USA OEM, even some of these companies who, let's say they have the capacity to do it, and then they've got room in their schedule to actually, make them. Would they be able to make enough for people to get their hands on them? No, absolutely not. It's just there's just no way. So that leaves, the benefit of going with a Chinese OEM being much higher quantity and obviously much lower cost, much more ability, right, to create the different variations, right, and a lot of these complex machining elements, right? So of all the Chinese OEMs, was there anyone that I was originally willing to work with? And the answer is no. It wasn't until I got to know Sergio from Kunwu and started talking to him about what he was going to be capable of. And initially I said, when you can show me, maybe we can talk more. And he did. Not only that, but he is incredibly active in the knife community. He delivers in terms of heat treatment, and he also utilizes steels that we don't see very often, like Vanx. So with the cherry on top being his ability to put a shiny DLC on not only the blade, but the frame, I think this is the person who's going to be able to do it. And he said, this is going to be our first actual integral. But yeah, I think we can do it. And wow, he really did. I mean, legitimately exactly what I was going for. And the final variation with these changes will be 100% outside of what I originally wanted for the lock. But this is an OEM who creates dependable products, high quality products. Execution's there, action is there, fit and finish is there. So it's a dream come true. And while it's not a US OEM, it is an OEM that can get the price down to reasonable on certain variations and absolutely deliver on quantity. The ability for people to get their hands on this stuff is important to me. So these are all of the details of Excalibur that I can think to cover. I'm certain that I missed at least a few things. So like I said, if you have questions, please leave them down in the comments section. I am hoping that we can open the pre-orders somewhat soon. I don't know exactly when that is, and I don't want to lead any of you on, but I would expect, you should expect to see this prototype going around to some other reviewers well before the prototypes show up. So if you're seeing reviewers drop their videos of this and talking about it, right, expect to see that in a few different places well before the pre-orders actually show up, because I want people to know about it, right? And I also want to share this knife with a lot of my friends in the community and other content creators that I have come to enjoy over time. I also want them to criticize it. It's important to me to allow other people to give their opinions on it before you guys decide if you even want it. Because so far, you only have my opinion on it, and I made it. So I'm only gonna say nice things. We gotta hear from other people, right? That's important. I want to be fair about this. I'm a knife reviewer, so that's important to me. But yeah, I'm very excited about this. You guys so far seem to be very excited, and that's very flattering because it was actually really terrifying to put my own blood, sweat, and tears. I mean, I didn't physically make this, but designing something that I thought was cool and that looked good, that was scary to release to the knife world. So I'm really happy that the majority of you, from my perspective, seem to really enjoy this. That's going to be it. I don't want to say that I'm not open for ideas for changing this one. This one is going to be released exactly the way that I have explained it. I'm not going to change any other major elements of this, but I am open to evolving this knife over time. So I don't want you to think that I ignored your suggestion if this knife doesn't release with a certain change. It just means maybe I'm tabling it. If it's a good suggestion, if I think it's a good suggestion, maybe I'm tabling it for a version 2 or version 3, right? So anyways, that's pretty much it today, guys. Thank you so much for supporting my channel and allowing me to bring this to the knife community. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex and on TikTok at _metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and click on that Metal Complex logo right there and subscribe, because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.